Hey folks, this is Ed Suzeski here, and I'm the author of Reconnect, Spiritual Restoration from Digital Distraction, and Flee, Be Silent, Pray, Ancient Prayers for Anxious Christians. And this isn't really a spirituality stream or video that I'm kind of saving for my YouTube site, but it's really a video more about book publishing and editing because what I do most days in the morning is I edit books for people, and that's a big part of what I do. And I wanted to put a video out that goes through maybe some of the conversations I have with authors. Maybe I'll make a series out of this too. But I wanted to talk about kind of the role that an editor plays in a nonfiction publishing process. When I talk to authors, kind of some of the first things that we do is I try to talk about kind of three areas where I'm going to try to help them. So obviously the project itself is their own, and I try to honor that in whatever way I can. I try to, adopt their voice, adopt their perspective, provided that it's not going to be harmful to somebody. I call out something like that. And I have had those conversations with authors that I felt like something they said has been unhelpful. And so what I want to talk about is kind of the basic conversation I have with authors when kind of like a first-time client who's coming to me to get their book published. This is kind of like something I slapped together. It's not the most pretty thing. Kind of rub some oil pastels on some paper here. But there's kind of three areas that I talk to authors about. It's the author, him or herself, the publisher, like what the publisher wants, and then the market, what people are looking for, what's out there, like what people want to read. And I try to help authors land in that middle area. It's all smudgy and gooey. I try to help people find that spot. And so I'm not looking for the book that I want to read. I'm trying to help them find the spot where it represents their passion, their expertise, what they can write about, what they want to write about, what they care about. There's a great book about Kurt Vonnegut's writing advice, and kind of the number one rule for writing, according to Kurt Vonnegut, is you have to care. Right? The more you care, the stronger your writing will be, and the more you can stick with the highs and lows of the publishing. The other thing, is the market. And so what do people want to read? And that includes like what's already out there. Like you don't want to like duplicate a book that's already published and already kind of takes up that space. Have the ideas been said like 100 times? And the truth of the matter is that even if something has been said a lot, if there's a market for it, then you just publish more of it, right? So that's why we have lots of romance. We have lots of Amish romance. Like it's a market where there's a lot of demand. There's high demand for kind of predictable kind of story templates. So that's the other thing, is like market. So like, does the author have the expertise? Can they like actually write about this? Do they have the background story? Do they have some kind of, passion? And then do people want to read this? Has it been published on, a lot? And I'm going to go through some examples in a minute just to kind of help illustrate this. But then the last little bit of the puzzle here is the publisher. So if you're going independently, then you don't have to really worry about this. But what are publishers looking for, and what fits into their lines of interest and things like that. So I try to help authors that they want to go the publishing route with traditional publishers. How do you fit into that, into their plans and what they're hoping to do? And so that's kind of a bit of what I'm up to. I'm getting pastel on my hands here, so don't want to get on my books. All right, so here's one book that I did, Flee, Be Silent, Pray. And so the author circle, I was able to fit that into the circle because in part this is my story. I've lived it. And so if you're getting into book publishing, think about, have I lived this story, or do I have the expertise? So if you have a background, as an expert with a degree, then that's like kind of what your calling card is, right? So, I have a couple of friends who are sociologists, and so they write books about, sociology topics. I come out of an evangelical background, so, that's where this comes from as far as being an anxious person, learning to pray with contemplative prayer. Now, market, do people want to read this? So here's the question, like there's a lot of contemplative books out there. They don't need someone like me to tell them how to do this stuff. What a lot of people do need is they need someone who has been frustrated with prayer, who has struggled with prayer, and who has kind of found a way to incorporate this stuff. And so maybe these people aren't going to look up Thomas Keating or Richard Rohr or Cynthia Bourgeault. They're going to look at those books and kind of, like, oh, this is way too much for me. They need kind of like a mediator for someone to come and say, hey, I've been there with you. Here's how you kind of take this stuff and you can use it and apply it to your life. And then, some of those people go on to read those other books. But, as I positioned this book, in the market, it was this kind of mediating voice, okay, to kind of reach across these different groups. And then, finally, the publisher was Herald Press was looking to write to that, evangelical, post-evangelical, ex-evangelical, or mainline Christian group that was, trying to learn how to pray and looking for a guide for how to pray. So, and this has been one of my most successful books. It's been one of the most widely read and well reviewed. So I think that process kind of plays out. It's been a heavier lift to promote my book Reconnect because, in part, yes, this is like my story. I've lived it. But from an author perspective, I am writing about technology and spirituality and how technology impacts our spirituality. I have a Master of Divinity, but I don't have a spiritual direction certificate or degree or whatever. I am not a technology expert. I read a lot. I kind of, approach this like a reporter, but I'm not officially a reporter. But I did a lot of research for this book and, read the critical works that were out there. But, although it kind of met the need of the market and it met the need of my publisher, Herald Press, it's been a little bit of a harder sell for people because, it's like, well, who are you to write this book? And it's like, well, I've lived it. And when people read it, they really benefit from it. But it's a little bit harder to convince people to pick this one up. It's also just a difficult topic because from the market standpoint, people love their phones, right? So that's what the marketing director at Herald told me. It's like, people love their phone. This will be a hard sell. And it is. It is a hard sell. It's the kind of thing where people like it once they read it, but it's a little harder. So, that's, kind of beat up on myself a little bit there. But, I'll talk about another author that I consulted with. And here's kind of like what I talk about as far as I try to represent, who the author is and how they write. But I also try to think about, market and publishers and things like that. So this author came to me with a proposal, and I read through it and I said, you could write this book. It was very theological, but I said, you could do a really practical version of this book and still be true to who you are as an author. And the theological version of this book has been done 100 times. People don't need this. Publishers don't need this. So yes, like that, he could write that book and it would be fine, but it wouldn't hit very well in these two circles. And so I encouraged him to go a more practical direction. And I felt like that was still true to who he was as an author, but it hit these other circles. Now, he didn't really like that. He kind of went and did whatever he wanted. But, that's kind of how, I do push back on authors and try to help authors see, how they're going to reach their audience. And, I say the hard things and I have had, it's like I send the invoice and they pay it and I never hear, a word from them ever again. But I think that's what an editor tries to do with nonfiction books, especially, if someone's going independent. It's really helpful to have someone to look at your work and say, okay, here's your expertise, here's your voice, here's your story. And then how does it fit into the other needs that are out there, the other books that are out there, the perspective of readers and what readers are looking for. And so, when I edit a book, I always try to look for the voice of the author and to represent that and preserve that. But I am also, trying to think about what readers are going to make of it, how readers are going to compare it to other things that are out there. How are editors going to look at this book and assess it? And see how it meets their own needs or their own desires to reach a particular market. So it's maybe that's a little bit inside baseball for folks, but I feel like this is kind of the conversation I have with people who are starting out with writing their first book or trying to look for an editor for a nonfiction book. I try to present those kind of options and those challenges in reaching readers and in also presenting themselves authentically and tapping into their passion and desires to reach an audience. So I've got a bunch more about myself and my experience on my website, edcyzeski.com. I have a little for hire button there. And so you can just drop by and see what other folks have said about working with me. You can see what other books I've published. I love working with authors and kind of helping them go through this process, and making sure that we present something that's really clear and benefits readers quite a bit. But if maybe you're just kind of dabbling in this, I hope this video helps you think about your next steps and how to move forward. Thanks for dropping by.